Andrew, really appreciate the time. I guess let's just start with your story for the people that didn't get a chance to read it yet on how profound the difference really is between the NBA and the NFL.
Yeah, good morning, Ross. Always good to be with you. The NFL and NBA, we all gawk at these free agent deals. We do it in March every year, mid-March for the NFL, and we do it in July, fourth week every year for the NBA. And the numbers on the contract values overall are relatively equal. You know, we'll hear about NFL deals that are $80 million, $90, $100, $120 million, the same way we'll hear about NBA. But here's the key difference. In the NBA, $100 million equals $100 million. They're guaranteed contracts. They have full security. The shift of risk goes to the team, not the player. The team has all the risk on these deals. In the NFL, even for the best of the best, this happened with Derek Carr this week, it's really 2 years. I mean, which is the lowest risk for the team that the guy's going to play well right away this year, next year. And then after that, we'll see. Even for the best free agents, they get the first year guaranteed. Probably there's a trigger for a second-year guarantee in March. And then kind of after that, it's the team's option. And that's the major difference. I don't think it's overall money. I think it's security. And I think when I hear arguments, well, NFL contracts are guaranteed because of the injury risk. Well, I'm like, that's a great argument for the owners. But what about the players? You could argue they need it more because of the injury risk. So that's the primary difference, Ross.
So then why would be my question. Why is the NBA so much better than the NFL in that regard, in your opinion?
I think the two agents, and there's a collective agent for the players, and there's an individual agent for the players. NBPA, NFLPA, those are the unions. So on the union side, what can they do? They can get a higher guaranteed money, guarantee overall. And we talk about caps, but to me the issue is not really caps, because both these leagues have caps. It's minimum spending by teams, by the league. I just don't think it's high enough in the NFL. The union can work on that. But even greater need is the individual agents, especially for the stars, to really hold the feet to the fire of the teams, to say, we really need this guaranteed beyond 2 years. I mean, what are the Raiders going to say to Derek Carr and his agents when they say, you're really worried about cutting him at age 30? Why don't you just guarantee it? And those are the kind of things you got to break the seal, and it has to start with the stars, like a Carr, like a Luck, like a Rodgers, like a Cam Newton, and then you'll have a trickle down after that. That's what it's going to take, Ross.
Speaking of breaking the seal, by the way, I am going to wait as long as possible tonight after I start having some daddy sodas before I break the seal, Andrew. Appreciate anytime you can come on and join me here. Talking with Andrew Brandt, the Vice President of Player Finance for the Green Bay Packers for a very, very long time. What about just the total money, Andrew? Like, what about – I know there's less players in the NBA, and I know that there's a lot more games. But where's the NBA revenue at compared to the NFL? And how much bigger of a slice do the NBA players get of the total revenue than the NFL guys do?
Yeah, and I do hear the argument all the time when I tweet about the difference in these contracts that, hey, the NBA's got so many fewer players. Obviously, I know that. You know that. Everyone listening knows that. About a quarter of the roster, so 15 players versus 60 when you count up practice squad, injured players, et cetera, for the NFL. But look at it this way. The cap last year in the NBA was $94 million for 15 players. So you're talking whatever that is, 66-point-something million average if you just slice it down that way. For the NFL, you're talking $155 million for 60, sometimes 70 players. So that slice allocation is about $2 million per player, a little over 2. So we're talking about 3 times the difference allocation for NBA players. That doesn't seem right when the revenues, I don't know the most recent NBA number, Ross, but, you know, the NFL is going up about $1 billion a year in total revenues. It dwarfs other leagues. So we're going to be about $14 billion by the end of next year in terms of total revenue. So revenue should matter. and it just doesn't seem like they're mattering in this case.
So what about when you look at the model right now for the two sports? 'Cause I think that's what we're getting to. We're getting to the heart of the model between the NBA and the NFL. The NBA is generating, it seems like, Andrew, a lot more buzz in the offseason than maybe even the NFL, specifically free agency, okay? I think the NFL draft still gets more than the NBA draft, but specifically free agency, there's just a lot more buzz in the NBA because there can be these big trades like the Chris Paul trade. Doesn't seem to happen very often in the NFL. And you've got some marquee players that are free agents and likely to switch teams, which, again, rarely happens in the NFL. But the flip side, I guess, Andrew, is you got a bunch of teams in the NBA that really have no shot because they don't have, 2 or 3 star players like you need. Which one do you think has the better model?
I think it depends on how you feel about management and players. There is more liberties, there's more power in the NBA player base than the NFL player base. And one reason you've got to think, if not for obvious reasons, the leadership of the NBA Players Association, the president is a guy we've obviously been talking about the past couple of days, Chris Paul. And the vice president is a guy named LeBron James. I think that matters. I really do. I just think they bring a gravitas to the bargaining table with owners sitting across from them. Nothing against the player leaders for the NFLPA. I just think if you had, pick a name, Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, sitting across, I think it would come out at the end of the deal that there'd be a little more given. I just think that brings it. The other part of it is that the NBA really has, because of these future guarantees, the trading is interesting because it's about expiring contracts. It's about picking up players that will be off your roster. Like Brook Lopez traded the Lakers, the headline was, well, they'll use his cap room in 18 to get a superstar. And that's much more interesting than sort of the NFL, where there are no future guarantees except for a lone exception like a Brock Osweiler trade. You just don't even need those trades because teams just dump players because their contracts aren't guaranteed. So there's just a lot more interesting business options when you have players having the power that they do and can dramatically alter fortunes of teams.
Last question I have for you, Andrew, and it's something that you and I talked about. It might have even been earlier this week on my podcast, but the next thing that's coming up that's going to be big after NBA free agency, after about the next week or so, it's going to be the franchise tag deadline in the NFL, and it's really primarily going to be Kirk Cousins. That's more interesting than Le'Veon Bell or Tremaine Johnson or whatever. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on what you think is going to happen with Kirk Cousins, because every report you hear, everybody out there says it's highly, highly unlikely that they get a deal done.
Yeah, and I believe you as well have a little bit of counterintuitive feeling about Kirk Cousins. I hear about all this leverage, and if they get this franchise tag next year and $35 million, whatever. I just think deadline spur action. It's going to come down to a situation the middle of July where Kirk Cousins has a choice. He can play for $24 million, nothing wrong with that, for 1 year, or he can accept the Redskins deal, which is definitely not going to be in line with some of these projections and taking into account a $35 million franchise next year. It's going to be, pick a number, 50 to $55 million guaranteed. And you can do all the calculations you want that's not enough. He's got so much leverage. But at the end of the day, is he going to take $24 million guaranteed, or is he going to take 50-something million guaranteed? And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think at the end of the day, he'll do a deal. And to argue about the theories of future tags is kind of irrelevant. Now, maybe he'll have a lot of leverage next year, but that's next year. So I just think it comes down to, do you want to do a deal? I think Kirk Cousins ultimately, despite all the noise about being unhappy earlier this offseason, does want to do a deal. And I think one gets done July 15th or 16th. The deadline's the 17th.
Andrew, really appreciate the time. Always good to talk with you on any outlet I can get you on the horn. Thanks so much.
You got it, Ross. Enjoyed it.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.